Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, Station Manager for Manatee Educational Television, and it's our great pleasure to have with us today Representative Jim Boyd from District 71. Representative, thank you again for taking the time out of what I'm sure is a very busy schedule to come and update this community on some of the great things that are happening in Florida and in your district.
Thank you, Charles. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and certainly I appreciate the opportunity to be in front of your viewers and be able to talk about issues that are important to all of us, so thank you.
Well, there's a lot of things that are going on, and I kind of want to recap a little bit. But first of all, let me tell our audience a little bit. You represent District 71, which is most of Manatee County and most of the city of Sarasota, and this is your second term in the House of Representatives. And you've recently, very recently, been appointed to the chair of the Government Operations Subcommittee, and you're also on the Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee, the Joint Committee on Public Counsel, and the Select Committee on Oversight. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And also on the State Affairs Committee. You have a lot of work ahead of you, I see. So it's a great honor to have been appointed by the leadership to the chair of the Government Operations Committee. And I believe the Speaker, Mr. Weatherford, was quoted as saying that one of the reasons why he wanted to do this because of the trust that they have in you to get things done.
Well, that's very kind, Charles. Thank you. And we work hard to serve our communities and serve our constituents, which is first and foremost in the process. There's opportunities that come along for us, and to be a chair of a committee as a sophomore is something I'm very proud of and very thankful, because I think in the end that can only help us and our community as well have a seat at the table with leadership in the House. So it's a privilege, it's an honor, and I'm looking forward to the next assignment.
Well, we want to talk a little bit about the responsibilities of that committee a bit later, but I want to kind of recap some of the things and accomplishments that you've done over the period of time that you've been in the legislature. Now, you received a lot of recognition for the personal injury protection legislation that was passed during your first term, and that was a very critical piece of legislation that was really had nothing like it before. Is that correct?
Yes, we've talked a little bit about it in the past, as you know, but it was a problem. It is a problem in Florida. It's a $2 billion fraud problem, and our friends and neighbors and constituents' insurance premiums are rising as a result of it. So we tried to enact a pretty significant reform that got at the fraud and that ultimately would cut insurance premiums. And in some cases, that's happened already. We haven't seen quite the reduction that we're looking for in the long run, but it takes a little while to play itself out and for those rates to change. But we're excited and looking forward to good results in the next year or two as the law really truly takes hold.
Well, with your background and expertise in insurance and insurance issues, I'm sure you brought a lot to the table to kind of craft that legislation to make it a really good thing for the state of Florida.
It gave me a little bit of a heads up on, on the issue and what it would take to maybe get at the issue, but I had a lot of collaboration from a lot of people. The CFO was very involved in it, Department of Fraud, his fraud investigation department, and as well as lots of other players in the marketplace and in the state, consumer advocate groups, and just a variety of people that really it impacts, and their constituency is impacted by it. So it was a pretty strong collaborative effort to get at the reform, and I trust that it'll have some significant results as we move forward.
And I'm sure it will, but I want to talk about the last session, if I may, and your position in the leadership, again, as the chair of the Elections and Ethics Committee, or I'm not sure if it's elections and ethics or ethics and election. However, the point is that after the election, there were several key issues that the legislature needed to address and wanted to address, and you were appointed to be the chair of that committee, and were tasked with a variety of different specific tasks that you wanted to accomplish. Can you tell us a little bit about what was accomplished and why it was important?
Sure, thank you very much for asking on that. And it is very important for Florida. You know, I heard over and over, and we've heard, you know, Florida's the brunt of the late night comics and the humor and all of the things that have been attendant to some of our elections. And we did have some problems. And 2 years prior, we enacted somewhat significant election reform that had some issues with it that became problems. So last year, we worked very hard in a bipartisan fashion. I'm very proud of the fact that Democrats and Republicans alike worked very closely together to do what was right for Florida. And we listened to a variety of stakeholders from all over the state, the supervisors of elections, the Secretary of State, League of Women Voters, and just a variety of constituents that came and shared their own ideas and their own thoughts and problems that they'd had in the process. And as a result, together, we were able to craft legislation that extended early voting hours, extended some days. It got at some of the big problems. It gave supervisors the ability to choose additional sites for their early voting locations, which in Manatee County, for instance, we only had one site.
Correct.
Right, and they were handcuffed in Manatee County by legislation that had been passed before. So it opens that up a little bit. So I just think it makes the process a lot smoother, a lot easier for voters that are registered to vote. And I'm very happy that we were able to accomplish all of that with, as you probably read, at the end of the day in the vote on the floor, we had one vote against it.
That's right.
And I hate to say it was one of my Republican colleagues that actually voted against it. So it was a great accomplishment, not for me, not for us, but for the state of Florida. I'm very proud that I got to be part of that.
And you know, it's key that you stress the bipartisanship of crafting this legislation together, because it was an important issue across the aisle for both Republicans and Democrats and everybody in between. But some of the legislation focused on a lot of key things that were left undone for a long period of time. Among those is changing the campaign finance donation limits, which I think was a huge issue for a lot of people. You also put a ban on shadow committees that have a continuous existence, which was another issue. But also one of the things that you brought up and put into the legislation was tougher penalties for people who don't file their financial disclosures on time. Why do you think all of those elements were really important to address in this election reform?
Well, Charles, you know, the unfortunate thing, I think, as an elected official, these days, a lot of us have gotten kind of a bad name, and they look at politicians just being you know, not above board and not accountable to anyone, and we don't, you know, most of us obviously don't operate that way, and we don't want to. And I think this just increased transparency, it increased accountability, it shortened reporting time, so the public can real time go online and see what's going on with somebody's campaign and somebody's finances, where the money's coming from, where the money's going. As you said, we did away with CCEs. And in the perfect world, the CCEs weren't a bad thing, but there were ways in CCEs monies could be used for lots of things that, you know, really those that had them didn't have to be accountable for. So we didn't like that. The public doesn't like that. I think the public deserves better and deserves more from us. And so I was very excited that we were able to really increase all levels of accountability and transparency. And I think that the public will be better served by that. And I think it sets us at a little higher standard and makes us respond a little differently to our constituents.
And it sets a real high standard for Florida now, is that, you know, we have these legislation in place now. So we can be very proud of, you know, both our ethic legislation and our election thing, and we want to move forward. You know, whatever the mistakes or misgivings of the past, you want to move forward and make this a very transparent state.
True, you know, and frankly, not because I was part of it or did it, we're out in front of the nation now on a lot of those issues, and I'm very proud of that. And the reality is, you know, we have close to 19 million Floridians, a diverse population from all over the country moves and lives here and retires here and works here. And, you know, so as far as the late night humor, frankly, probably some of that will always go on, and some of it's even entertaining, and that's what I look at it as. But what's not entertaining is the fact that we had a lot of work to do that needed to be done to increase that transparency and that accountability, and I think we did that, and I'm very proud that we were able to do that, and I think that Florida ought to be proud that we did that as well.
Well, Representative, I think based upon the success and the leadership that you provided in both the election and engineering, election and ethics legislation, was the fact that the leadership of the House saw that and found that you were an individual that can get things done and can get it done in a very bipartisan manner, as was evidenced in that legislation. So they decided, if Jim Boyd can take care of election and ethics reform, he can take care of government operations. So when the Speaker appointed you to this position as the chair of the subcommittee, there's a lot of big issues on the table facing the legislation in the next session. Is that correct?
That is correct. As you know, last year, probably the biggest issue in government ops was pension reform. And it passed the House, it didn't pass the Senate, so the bill died. I suspect that will be an issue that will come up again this fall. I do believe that hopefully with my leadership and with my ability to work with others, if we do take it on again, I think we'll have more of a collaborative effort with the Senate, because we want to do something that is good for Florida and good for the taxpayers, but also something that we can all agree is good, and not, divide up amongst both chambers as to what each chamber might think that might be different than the other.
Now, you're going back a little early this year and for session, for workshops and consultation, and you'll go back to Tallahassee mid-September. Is that true?
Correct. We have committees start this year in September, so we'll have a week in September. It's the third week of September. We have a week in October, a week in November, a week in December. And then in January, we're there for 2 weeks of committees. February, we're there for 3 weeks of committees. And then March and April, we're there all of March and April for sessions. So there's a lot of work to be done, and frankly, I'm glad we're going back early to get started.
And that's kind of a new process, isn't it? Beginning a little bit early, to start on the committee process?
Well, I think as a result of this not being an election year, everybody's in place, and so we just kind of roll to the next year. Last year, as you know, we didn't start until December with committees, but after the election, we had new members that had to be sworn in the organizational session, so it started a little bit later then. But part of it is I think we want to get going and do the people's work, but the other part is I believe it's, everybody's kind of in place, so they're ready to go.
And I think that's a really important point, is that the more preparation that one can do is that as you move into the session, your plans and your strategies are already in place. Which kind of leads me to my next question, and you've had the opportunity over the last few weeks and over the summer to meet with some of the fellow delegates from Manatee County, Sarasota delegation. And I wanted you to take a moment to talk about the quality and the cooperation of that delegation and how you feel that they're very proactive for this area.
Thank you. I have the privilege of being on both the Manatee delegation and the Sarasota delegation. And I can tell you, we've got Republicans and Democrats on the delegations. We work very well together. I'm very proud of our delegation. I think everybody in the delegation really is in it for the right reasons and trying to do the right things. And I think we work very hard together to try to do what's right for our communities. Since session and we've been back, all of us have had a variety of meetings with different constituencies, from individuals to nonprofits to just regular, everyday citizens, and had a lot of good feedback. We've heard a lot of what's important to our communities, and I think we'll be dealing with a lot of those issues. As you probably, it doesn't take a lot to realize and know that jobs are still very important. I think I'm very proud of what we've created over the past 3 years. Close to 400,000 new jobs in Florida. We've cut unnecessary regulation. We've tried to lower taxes. I think this next year, jobs is going to still be a very, very key element of everything we do. I think we're going to try to lower some taxes where we can. And I think we're still looking at unnecessary and needless regulation that are in place that we might be able to eliminate to make families and businesses a little more nimble and a little easier to handle their own affairs without government getting in the way. Certainly there's a role for government, and I think we all agree to that. But I think we're still going to be focused on what's right for Florida, what's right for families, and what's right for businesses, and trying to do that as we move forward into the fall.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Representative, because I kind of want to talk about some of the other things that you've accomplished as well. And I've heard you speak in the past. There were over 2,000 regulations have been eliminated, but also one of the key things that you initiated last year in session was a manufacturing bill, which was part of that local county ordinance, which encourages businesses within a community. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you thought that was a significant piece of legislation?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, you know, manufacturing, we've been lagging behind the country in manufacturing jobs and creating new manufacturing opportunities in Florida. And this simply streamlines the process. It doesn't eliminate anything that's important. Every silo that has to be addressed in terms of a manufacturer coming to Florida or expanding still has to be in place. But all this does is streamline the process. So by local ordinance, so each county, each community can adopt it or not adopt it. They don't have to, but if they have it in place, it allows the process to speed up. The state has 2 months to make approvals if it gets to that level. If they don't do it in that time frame, then it's deemed approved. But the state is also in the Department of Environmental Regulation, the Department of Economic Opportunity, and all of the state silos of responsibility have said, we can do it, and we can respond that quickly. So simply said, and I'll use an example of a manufacturer here in Manatee County. Let's say they had all of their approvals done from city, county, all the way up through state, and they, in their footprint, on their property, they wanted to make a change in a building. Instead of a 5,000 square foot building, maybe they wanted a 4,000, or maybe they wanted a 6,000. As long as they don't change life safety codes or dramatically change the scope of the work that's being done there, they can do it. It's already been approved. They don't have to go back through the entire process again, which, as you know, Charles, takes time and money, and they're able to respond a little bit quicker, which gets them to the market quicker, which makes them more competitive. So I hope, and we hope, those that supported the bill, and of course it was a broad bipartisan support on that as well, and the governor was very enthusiastic about supporting it. I hope that will encourage manufacturers, not only that we have in Florida, to expand, but also those that are looking for a place to go, that Florida might be a manufacturing friendly state, which I think is very good for our economy.
And you know, I think that's important to mention and for the audience to understand that Manatee County was kind of a leader in trying to help with fashion this legislation. And I think I've heard you speak in the past about, you know, some of these effects can take place right now. And those are for businesses that are large or small.
Thanks for mentioning that. I should have said that. You're very much on point there. Manatee County, I think, is leading the state in that. Ed Hunsicker and John Barnott came to me along with the county commission and said, this is very important for Manatee County. We want to be a leader in the state and adopt this quick. In fact, John Barnott, one of our county building official, came to Tallahassee and testified on what a good law this would be, and helped us gain support in the legislature for the initiative from a local level. So it was very important in Manatee County. I believe they're working on being the first one in the state to adopt the ordinance, which is also very exciting for us.
And it is very exciting because, you know, that comes back to that central point that you were talking about, is creating new opportunities and new jobs and new opportunities for business as well. And there's a lot happening. As you mentioned, you know, the state has created over 300,000 jobs, close to 400,000 jobs, and they're continuing to do this with new efforts. I think there's the effort is on to bring Amazon to the state of Florida, Hertz to this area, and also a large corporation has just relocated to the Ellenton area, which is Feld Entertainment, which is the largest live entertainment conglomerate in the world. So that's huge things that are happening. Why do you think it's important that the governor and the legislature continue to put that emphasis on bringing work to the state of Florida?
Well, you know, when we tell our story in Florida, I don't think there's a company in the country or maybe even the world that wouldn't like to be in Florida. But what businesses I found like and need is certainty. And they don't want the regulatory environment to be one way this year and a different way the next year. So if we can create that certainty and that stability and a business-friendly environment, they're going to come. Now, we don't I'm not suggesting we give away the store, and I'm not suggesting we throw regulation to the wind. Certainly, they have to comply with our standards and our regulations, and to maintain the state that we have, the quality of life, protect our natural resources. But I can tell you, the legislature that I'm part of, the governor, every day the governor specifically, every day, I can promise you, is calling some business somewhere in the country saying, what about coming to Florida? It happened with Hertz, it happened with Amazon, Feld, being, kind of one of their big components with Ringling Brothers, a longtime Sarasota organization. They've relocated, as you said, just north of the river into between Palmetto and Arlington. That's huge for our area. I think 400 jobs potentially.
Correct.
I mean, that is very, very significant. So I want to be part of, and I think my colleagues in our delegation absolutely want to be part of continuing that momentum and continuing to build. I mean, Hertz is a huge example. They're bringing their entire headquarters to Estero down by Fort Myers. That is so significant for Florida and for Southwest Florida in terms of job creation and families moving in and just everything attendant to it, and the ripple that goes all through the community from social and business and pleasure. It's just a great thing to be doing, and I'm a business guy by day, so I mean that thing really kind of jazzes me up. I mean, I really like that, but I also understand that I'm responsible to make sure we protect Florida, protect our environment, protect natural resources, and I think we're doing that as well.
Well, isn't there's this healthy competition, gentleman's competition between Governor Perry from Texas and Governor Scott to see who's creating the most jobs and who's bringing the most business. To say now Texas seems to be a little bit ahead of Florida, but not by much.
I think Governor Perry's looking over his shoulder, and I think Governor Scott's gaining on him. There is a healthy competition, and I've heard some stories of trophies that have been passed back and forth on a win on this or a win on that. And I think that's good. I mean, that in the real world, whether you're at high school athletics or whether you're in the business where you compete, and that's healthy. And as long as it's fair and honest competition, I welcome it, and I'm excited that they have that competition. I expect us to beat Governor Perry, if not by the end of this year, certainly by the first part of 14. So.
Well, I have to say that Governor Scott, as you well know, was just recently here last week to speak at the Benderson Aquatic Center to kind of kick that off, and he was there with Mr. Blackheader, Mr. Benderson, Dick Vitale was there. It was a wonderful occasion kicking off the development of that area, and as the governor spoke, he talked about the economic impact that the aquatic center would have, not only with the rowing, world rowing things in 2017, that happens, but also what a tremendous asset that brings to this community and this area. Why do you think places like that are very important? Why do you think the governor was here to sing its praises?
Well, certainly he supports it, as we know, and I think it just adds to the fact that it is a huge economic driver for our community and our state. With just weekend events at the Rowing Center that have been happening over the past year or so. As an example, I was talking with John Monetti at the Columbia Restaurant, and there was an event one weekend at the Rowing Center, and he said lines were out my door at the restaurant every night, and they all said we're at this competition at the Rowing Center, we're staying on the beach, we're staying downtown, we're staying in Manatee County, and we want to come down to in that case St. Armand's Key to have dinner. So it adds so much value in so many ways, and also puts us on the map. I mean, with the World Rowing Championship that we're all optimistic that we will see, that puts not only Florida but Manatee, Sarasota County, Florida, right in the radar of a great place to be in the country, in the world.
And I think you're exactly right. I mean, this is a kind of a true indicator of things to come. And it'll just be a few short weeks, if that, before final announcements are made on what the final determination is. Now, we only have a few minutes left, Representative. I want to touch base on a couple of I think, very important things. As we spoke before, there's a lot of big issues that the legislature is going to have to fit into their schedule. One of those is going to be the affordable health care issue. The governor and the Senate and the House all had a kind of a different perspective. Where do you see this going, and how do you think this is going to be reconciled?
Great question, Charles. As you mentioned, everybody was in a different place this year. The House had a position, and I supported the House position. We had a plan. We had a plan that Florida could afford, and it took care of the neediest of the needy. The Senate had a plan, which they thought was a very good plan, and then the governor, as you know, wanted to take the $51 billion of federal money. And I understand that's taxpayer money,
right.
And so why shouldn't we take advantage of it? So with the affordable health care rolling out, potentially this fall, maybe a little bit later, we're hearing different things out of Washington. I think it's something that we're going to look at. The House position, I think, was one that we want to do what's right for our constituency and for our citizens, but we also want to do something that we can afford and that we can afford to sustain if we have to. And I think that's the key, that I don't want to vote to put Florida on the hook for $50 billion if we can't afford to sustain it. And I understand there's people that need health care, and we want to help those that need help in our communities, in our cities and towns. I don't think there's anybody on either side that doesn't agree with that. But how do we pay for it? How do we implement it? And how do we take care of those that really need help that otherwise couldn't help themselves? And I think I'm sure that's going to have some more debate, some more dialogue as we move into committees. I've talked to the healthcare chairman of the House side already, and he said they're still having conversations. But I think at the end of the day, it's got to be something that takes care of those that need our help, that we can afford and that we can pay for as a
generation,
state.
for years to come.
Exactly.
And, I'd welcome you to come back and discuss, the healthcare issue, probably, with perhaps a panel and thing, because that's a key issue that's going to be facing us for years to come. And I think the resolution of that is something that all Florida is kind of looking towards the legislature to find that right plan that's right for everybody. In the last few minutes, I just want to touch base on a couple of things. As you mentioned, last year the legislature put a bunch of money back into a variety of things. They put $2 billion back into education, and that was, for rewarding of teachers, new teacher raises, a variety of different things. But there's a lot of other concerns about education. And recently, the governor has convened kind of an education summit, which is meeting, fairly soon, with a lot of variety of different interests to be speaking about the concerns that education is bringing up. Specifically, one of those is the Common Core curriculum. First of all, tell us your thoughts on that and why it's important to have a summit, and where do you think that the legislature may have to weigh in?
Thanks, Charles. And what you mentioned earlier, education is of huge importance to Florida for obvious reasons and for a variety of reasons. I mean, we need to have a state-of-the-art education system so we can attract and train and keep kids and young people as they grow up. We also need to understand that we compete. We don't compete with Sarasota County or Fort Lauderdale, or we compete globally in this world and in this economy. So our students need to be educated in a way that competes with kids from Thailand or South Korea or wherever. So and I think that's where the Common Core kind of curriculum idea has come from, that there ought to be some set of standards that we can all agree that that's where we need to get an education. Now, there's a lot of fact and there's a lot of fiction about Common Core, and so maybe sometime when we have more time we could get into some of that as well. But in the big picture, I think it's important that we have some type of a standard and student performance metrics that equip us to compete globally. And I think, parents want that, students want that, teachers want that.
Exactly.
And I think, when we can agree that we're all in this for the same reason, then that's to get students to perform and to learn. I think that's what's going to kind of gel everything together. And then some of the dialogue around some of these, buzz phrases or whatever may not be quite as important. But I think it's very important that we educate our kids to a level that they can compete globally. And I think that's where we're headed. I think we've got some bugs and some kinks to work out, and I know we will be. And I think this summit that the governor is holding will be a good start to kind of get that dialogue and that conversation kind of going. So I look forward to hearing the results of that.
Well, we'd welcome you back to talk more about that, perhaps with some educators to see what their thoughts on this are as well. Representative, we're kind of winding down a little bit, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk about some of the critical things that you think are important that you're looking forward to in this next legislative session.
Thanks, Charles. And again, you know, it's always a pleasure to be with you and to be in front of your viewers, and I really enjoy that, and I'm very grateful that you give me that opportunity. This next year, as you talked about some of the committees I'm on, education is going to be a focus, healthcare is going to be a focus. One of the select committees that you mentioned is gaming that I'm on, and the Seminole Gaming Pact comes up next year that my predecessor and now our Senator Galvano so carefully and I think artfully crafted 5 years ago. So that'll be a conversation. You know, there's a lot of interest that want to come into Florida in terms of gaming, so that's going to get a lot of interest, I think a lot of activity this coming session. And the other that we touched on earlier are jobs and then the overall economy. You know, we see good signs, I think, in the economy. We're not out of the woods, and I know there's still people that are out there hurting, and I want to do everything I can to help make their opportunities increase and make their opportunities better and allow for our economy to kind of rebound in a way that we would all benefit from. So all of that and everything else that will come up over the next fall and the months ahead we'll be dealing with, but it's a great privilege and pleasure to serve Florida. I've said that on your show before, and I'll say it again. I don't take my responsibility lightly, and I don't take the privilege that the voters of Manatee and Sarasota County have given me lightly. Welcome calls, good or bad. If you have concerns or complaints anytime, would love to hear from your viewers and our friends that have issues or that have concerns. And
we have your information up on the screen, so I would encourage anybody, if they had a question or they had a concern, you know, to get in touch with the representative, and I'm sure that you'll get a direct and an immediate response. Representative Boyd, I want to take a moment just to thank you again for taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule to join us and give us an update. And we welcome you back at any time to update us on a specific matter or, you know, legislation in general, because I think, you know, you're doing a great service to the community by kind of giving that insight and knowledge out there. And as you were talking earlier about politicians, you know, kind of like tarred with the same brush, but I would suggest to you that perhaps you're not a politician, that you're more of a public servant. And I want to thank you very much for joining us, and we welcome you back at any time.
Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it very much. Thanks.
And thank you for joining us on this very special edition of Up Close on METV.